It's one of the oldest arguments in modern society that the government should legalise and control the sale of marijuana. At every party we've been to, there's always that one white, wannabe Rastafarian fella. Unlike cigarettes, smoking marijuana isn't addictive. Yeah, sure, but have you ever heard of bathing? Peanuts kill more people each year than marijuana ever has. Seriously, soap and water hasn't killed anyone either, Sean. And Australians have a relaxed attitude towards smoke and dope. If our parents weren't stoned, how do you explain that Daddy Cool is a national treasure? So the most recent National Drug Strategy Household Survey reports that about 1 in 3 Australians admit to having used marijuana, 1 in 10 admit to having used marijuana recently, and 1 in 15 asked to borrow our Season 8 Family Guy DVDs because apparently weed is easier to get than the plot of Road to the Multiverse. So not surprisingly, figures compiled by the Australian Crime Commission show that the total amount of cannabis seized in Australia was 5 tonnes in 2007 alone. 5 tonnes. 5 fucking tonnes. That's a barn worth of weed. It's a whale worth of weed. That's about how much weed I'd need to suffer through a One Direction concert. But at $25 a gram, it's $125 million. And that's just the shit that got seized. So marijuana is a big money industry here in Australia. Not surprisingly, also has quite a large criminal footprint. According to the Australian Crime Commission illicit drug data report, cannabis-related offences constitute nearly 71% of all drug arrests in Australia. Not meth, or heroin, or kids huffing hand sanitizer to get a little drunk, but marijuana. 71% of arrests. Can you imagine the cost to the taxpayer to catch, try, and incarcerate all these Australian dope fiends? You kind of have to, because we couldn't find the real figures. But what if there was a way to do a case study on the legalisation of marijuana without having to jump through all that political argy-bargy mess? Enter Kronic, an example of a whole rash of synthetic marijuana substitutes that flooded the Australian market. Kronic is technically an incense labelled not fit for human consumption. That didn't stop trailblazers blazing trails with it and smoking this shit by the truckload. Now, while Kronic contained no tobacco or actual marijuana of any kind, it instead used synthetic cannabinoids that when you smoked them got you high, emulating the effect of regular THC. Synthetic cannabinoids? Gosh, that sounds healthy, said the nobody ever. Kronic looked like weed, it acted like weed, but it wasn't really weed. Kronic is like the Meryl Streep of designer drugs. It could probably win an Oscar. So replacing THC in the legal weed lineup was synthetic cannabinoid JWH-018, or JWH-073, or JWH-069, or pretty much any other derivative of this base chemical compound. And that's the beauty of synthetic weed, because for every cannabinoid they would ban, 2 more would just pop up in its place, like little stony hydras. But because there are so many derivatives in the synthetic cannabinoid marketplace, no one's been able to really test these things, except occasionally on rats. And they found that synthetic cannabinoids ranged in strength from 1/4 the potency of regular THC to 800 times the potency of regular THC. Which means a single bong hit could either just get your night started, or send you full-blown into 3 hours of Bear Grylls survival mode where you run an internal dialogue reminding yourself to breathe. So smoking real weed can make you paranoid and delusional, but smoking fake weed can also make you paranoid and delusional. But for a small window of time, Kronic was still perfectly legal. So while consenting adults were enjoying Kronic responsibly, dinner parties, 30 Rock marathons, A-League soccer games, why else would you go to a stadium to watch a bunch of guys play soccer? People in the mining industry were showing up for work high as shit. And yeah, okay, there are some professions where showing up to work blazed can be beneficial. Movie reviewer, hip-hop artist, Peter Slipper's personal secretary. Driving a fucking mining truck isn't one of them. If Kronic was a litmus test for the actual legalization of marijuana, then the mining industry failed in spectacular fucking fashion. When they started testing mine workers to see if they'd been using Kronic, the results came back 1 in 3 positive. Alright, now guys, look. I know you're bored out of the mines. But you get paid a lot of money to suffer through that boredom. You can afford wave runners and quad bikes and houses. Don't ruin it for the working middle class who just want to unwind at the end of the week by smoking a large bag of incense marked not fit for human consumption. And while the Australian government has now enacted legislation effectively banning all forms of synthetic cannabinoid, Kronic was widely available here in Australia for just about 3 years. If you think about it, in that time, were there murders and rapes and Mayhem in the streets? No. But, and I kid you not, Domino's Pizza did post record profits. The Kronic experiment shows that having a form of legal marijuana available to the public had no wider impact on the general population. In an example of stunning free market capitalism, a group of Boffins got together and created a legal supply for something they saw was in incredibly high demand. So the biggest loser in this whole affair wasn't the guy living in his mother's basement pulling bucket bongs at Kronic every morning. It was us, the ATO and the Australian taxpayer. Because instead of the near 60% tax we collect on tobacco and tobacco products, on Kronic, we only collected the 10% GST. You want the budget to come back in the surplus? Look, legalize marijuana. The budget, it'll be surplusing like a motherfucker. But forget that decriminalization for personal use and all that other hippie bullshit. Legalize weed, but make it a highly regulated industry like tobacco or opium. You create jobs, you give the customer what they want, and then you tax the hell out of it. Put the money back into NDIS or mental health or public schools or state housing. Then maybe if everyone's high, we might finally make a couple of steps forwards on the gay marriage issue.